There are so many journeys in Middle-earth, and in particular in The Lord of the Rings, but very rarely do you get to see anyone actually eat anything. There is one thing that we do get to see, that is actual food, and that is the elvish waybread known as Lembas. Now, this is what Galadriel gives to the Fellowship of the Ring, but it's not the only kind of instance of this kind of sustenance, and that is what I'm going to be talking about today. So it's not just elvish waybread, there's like Manish waybread too. Hello everybody, it's Friday. That means it's a lore video on this channel, which is called Gone with Gandalf. If you would like and subscribe if you like this kind of content, then that helps me out. Right, let's get on into it. But let's begin with Lembas. Lembas was the food that was given by Galadriel to the Fellowship of the Ring, as I already said. But where did it come from? Well, it was actually derived from corn that was grown in Aman by Yavanna, who was kind of one of the Valar. That's here, Cram. From this corn it was baked, and Orome gave it to the elves upon the great journey. Now, the first one to really know of the recipe in Middle-earth was Melian. Melian, of course, was a Maia, but she was then later the Queen of Doriath. That was the largest and main kingdom of the Sindarin elves of Beleriand in the First Age. It was highly caloric, it was wrapped in leaves as well to keep it fresh, and it would keep fresh indefinitely, really, and it was like a cake. Not like what you might often think is a cake, but more of a biscuit, and it was brownish in colour, and it had like a softer centre, so that seems like quite the intriguing texture, really. But it was said that this waybread, a couple nibbles here and there, would keep you going if you had a long march ahead of you, which is obviously why it was given to travellers.
Lembas. One small bite is enough to fill the stomach of a grown man.
How many did you eat?
4.
In one of the more significant events of the First Age, the Queen of Doriath, Melian the Maia, did give some Lembas waybread to Thorin, or Thorin. Thorin was her foster child, but he, of course, was not an elf, and this was seen as a significant thing because this was the first time that a non-elf had received some, and this is even more significant. I've got a quotation here from the Silmarillion. According to the customs of the Eldalier, the keeping and giving of Lembas belonged to the queen alone. So this was like a royal decree, like, you may now have the Lembas, and you may now be merry. Now, as I said, elvish waybread, or Lembas, was very rarely given to other races, but in The Lord of the Rings you had Galadriel give it to the Fellowship. Now, of course, she's not really a queen, although I suppose she is. She's more like the Lady of the Golden Wood. She is, in our modern day society, you would call her like the head of state. So she definitely would have had the authority at this point, given the fact that Melian had not been around for over 6,000 years. So clearly, she had been taught of the ways of how to grow this corn, and they had some stocks in Lothlorien to be able to give it out so readily. Now, just like any other things that have been crafted by elves, species such as the orcs absolutely detested it, and also Gollum could not eat it or anything like that. Just as I spoke in last week's video, fair products by fair hands is kind of disgusting to those of the evil variety. Well, that's the elvish variety done. Let's move on to a Manish variety, and this is from the Hobbit. I've got a nice little quotation from it, and it's called Cram, and Cram was made by the men of Laketown and presumably also of Dale before that. It is biscuitish, keeps good indefinitely, is supposed to be sustaining, and is certainly not entertaining, being in fact very uninteresting except as a chewing exercise. Clearly, Cram is not anywhere near as good as Lembas. It sounds like quite the dour dour foodstuff to have, but I suppose it works much in the same way, that it will just keep you going on long marches such as this, where Thorin and company had been given it by the men on their journey from the lake up to the mountain of Erebor. Now, Gimli in the Fellowship of the Ring does actually, when he sees the Lembas for the first time in Lothlorien, he looks at it and he thinks it's Cram, and then he has some of it and he's like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And they're like, yeah, it's Lembas, mate. Don't have too much. You will be full on that for the rest of the day. Like, don't have it all. This was presumably made of just flour, although I'm not entirely certain on that, but without it having any taste or anything and being exceptionally difficult to chew, that would suggest it, and then it has very little taste to boot. But in addition to that, in The Hobbit, Beorn gives Thorin and company some honeycakes, which are his variety of waybread. It is said, though, that they are seldom given out to travellers once more, and there is a lot of honey in them. That means that they taste sufficiently better than Cram. They were twice baked cakes, and on a little of which they could march far. It was a secret recipe, but honey was in them, but made you thirsty, so not entirely good. But Gimli does say that the Beornlings, they were the finest bakers, and he did kind of mention them in the same breath as he was chowing down on the Lembas, being like, oh, this is so good, like, I haven't had something as good as this since I had those honey cakes, which I can't get anymore, like, And then finally, we get to the point which I would consider the most interesting part of this video, hence I put it as the last point. And we get to the Númenóreans. So we finally get over again to the Unfinished Tales, my favourite book, I suppose, to talk about on this channel. And it's kind of again of the disaster of the Gladdenfields. And during that little passage, we get to know of what the Númenóreans carry. And I've got a little quotation here once more, and it goes as such. Each of the Dúnedain carried in a small wallet on his belt a small phial of cordial and wafers of a waybread that would sustain life in him for many days. Now, the reason why I find this so interesting is because, okay, the Númenóreans did not have Lembas. They were not elves, obviously, but these are Númenóreans in exile. They've only been Númenor was only sunk less than 200 years ago. Númenor received many gifts from the Valar as well as the elves. Could they have also had some of this corn that was given to the elves brought over from Valinor and planted upon Númenor? The Númenóreans had access to far greater knowledge than the everyday man of Middle-earth, and because of this, they perhaps could have been able to manufacture their own kind of lembas from the same kind of corn as the real deal. However, it's going to be slightly neutered by the fact that it wouldn't have had the generations of, like the same elves catering to it, harvesting it, watering it. I don't know, I'm not a farmer, but I'd imagine there's something that goes on, goes along with it, and there is some kind of elven magic process that goes with it too. And then could this Númenórean variant of Lembas have been continuously grown by, the women of the Dúnedain in exile? Could they have kept the tradition ongoing? And would that have gone on into the late Third Age? And could that explain how Aragorn just doesn't ever sleep? How would he have had so much energy? Particularly, like, even if you look at, say, the journey from Bree to Rivendell, how was he able to do that? And did he just have on his person at all times just some of this Númenórean Lembas waybread, during his extensive travels throughout Middle-earth? Or because he was a defining figure of the Third Age and an elf friend, did he just get given some Lembas from Galadriel herself, or even Arwen? Who knows? It's just interesting to think about. Now, of course, then to tie this into the real world, waybread is not entirely a fictional thing. It is something that happened in Viking society, in Germanic society, of course. Tolkien was an avid reader of Norse mythology and Germanic myths of Germanic roots as well. So he's probably got a lot of inspiration from that. And there are such things as Scottish oatcakes even today, and I feel like that's probably, by the way, if you've ever had them, probably what Cram would taste like. Now, the keen-eyed and curious among you would have noticed in that quotation of the Númenóreans, they also had a small vial of cordial in addition to their waybread. Now, I didn't want to add that into this video because there are a few drinks which have a similar kind of magical effect, shall we say, on a person's stamina, and I'd like to do a separate video on those. So I hope that this video has been interesting. If you have any comments, any suggestions, then do feel free to put them down in the comments section down below. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'm going with Gandalf. Good day. Oh, and the hair, I swear, this is literally just how I woke up and I'm too lazy to do anything about it.